Nobody planned it. Nobody experimented. Nobody sat down one afternoon and thought, let's make a drink that changes how the brain works. Alcohol was not invented. It was discovered. And the discovery happened so long ago in such an ordinary way that most people never stop to ask how it started at all. But here's the thing. The story of alcohol is actually the story of something much bigger. It is the story of what happens when humans stumble into something powerful without fully understanding what they found. To understand how this happened, you have to go back roughly 10,000 years. Maybe further. Humans had just figured out farming. For the first time in history, food could be stored. Grain could be kept through winter. Fruit could be collected in large quantities. This sounds like pure progress. And it was. But stored food does something nobody anticipated. It ferments. Fruit left in a warm container does not stay fruit forever. Wild yeast, invisible and everywhere, lands on the sugars and begins consuming them. The byproduct of that process is ethanol, alcohol. It happens automatically. It requires no human intervention whatsoever. Nature does it entirely on its own. So imagine being one of the first humans to accidentally drink it. You stored fruit, you forgot about it for a few weeks, you came back, it smelled strange, it looked slightly different, but food was precious and you were not going to waste it. You drank it anyway. And then something happened that had never happened to a human brain before. The world got softer, the fear went quiet, the exhaustion of daily survival lifted, just slightly. Just for a moment. Pain dulled. Social walls came down, people who were cautious became talkative. People who were tired felt warm. Nobody knew what had happened, but everybody wanted it to happen again. This is not speculation. Archaeologists have found evidence of fermented beverages going back at least 9,000 years in China, where residue in ancient pottery contained traces of rice, honey, and fruit, all fermented together. In the Middle East, evidence of barley beer appears around the same time farming does. In Georgia, 8,000-year-old wine residue was found in clay jars buried underground. These were not accidents left behind. These were intentional productions, which means humans figured out how to recreate fermentation deliberately, very quickly after discovering it the first time. But here's the part most people miss. Early alcohol was not what we drink today. It was closer to a thick, slightly fizzy, mildly fermented porridge. The alcohol content was low. It was consumed like food, not like a recreational drug. In fact, in many early civilizations, fermented drinks were safer than water. Rivers and communal water sources were contaminated. Beer and wine, because of the fermentation process, were actually cleaner. Giving children diluted beer instead of river water was not reckless. It was reasonable. Alcohol kept people alive. And then it became something else entirely. In ancient Egypt, beer was currency. Workers who built the pyramids were paid partly in beer. Official rations included it daily, not because the pharaohs wanted drunk pyramid builders, but because beer provided calories, hydration, and was reliably safe to drink in a world without clean water infrastructure. In ancient Mesopotamia, one of the oldest written documents in human history, the Epic of Gilgamesh, includes a scene where a wild man is civilized partly by being introduced to bread and beer. The ancient Sumerians believed beer was a gift from the gods. They had a goddess of beer named Ninkasi, and they wrote hymns in her honor that doubled as brewing recipes. Think about that. The oldest known beer recipe in human history is written as a prayer. In Greece, wine became the foundation of an entire social institution called the symposium. Philosophers drank together and debated the nature of reality. Socrates famously could drink enormous quantities without becoming impaired, which his contemporaries found both impressive and suspicious. In medieval Europe, monasteries became the primary brewers of beer. Monks brewed it to sustain themselves during the fasting periods, since liquid did not technically break a fast. The quality and variety of beer improved dramatically inside monastery walls, and monks traded and distributed their recipes across an entire continent. The church and alcohol grew up together, not in opposition. But something else was happening alongside all of this. Humans were not just drinking fermented fruit and grain. They were noticing that certain fermented liquids were stronger than others. They were experimenting, And eventually, probably in the Arab world around the 9th century, someone figured out distillation. Heating fermented liquid and capturing the vapor concentrates the alcohol dramatically. What comes out the other side is not beer or wine. It is something fundamentally different. Spirits, hard liquor, the kind of alcohol that can genuinely destroy a person if misused. Distilled spirits spread across the world with trade routes. They arrived in Europe and changed everything again. Gin flooded London in the 1700s so cheaply and so quickly that historians now call it a public health crisis. Streets of people incapacitated, death rates rising, children neglected. An entire city destabilized by a liquid that started as fermented grain left too long in the wrong container. The same thing that made ancient Egyptians productive workers and helped medieval monks survive winter was now dismantling one of the most powerful cities on Earth. Same molecule. Completely different world, and today, thousands of years after some forgotten human drank spoiled fruit and felt the world go quiet for the first time. Alcohol is woven into almost every culture on Earth. Weddings and funerals, celebrations and grief, first dates and last conversations, religious ceremonies in some traditions and strictly forbidden in others. It is in your grocery store, your restaurants, your airports, your corner shops. It generates hundreds of billions of dollars every year. It has ended careers and started revolutions. It has inspired art and destroyed families. It has been blamed for wars and credited with peace treaties. All of it traces back to wild yeast, warm fruit, and a container left sitting too long. No plan, no invention, no genius, just nature doing what nature does and humans noticing and humans being humans. Tonight, somewhere on Earth, someone is raising a glass at a wedding. Somewhere else, someone is pouring their first drink after the worst day of their life. Somewhere else, a monk-brewed recipe is being bottled in a Belgian monastery the same way it has been for 500 years. And somewhere in a field, fruit is quietly fermenting on its own, the same way it has been for millions of years, waiting to be discovered all over again. But now you know how it started.